This is the process shot. I'm Michael. I'm stuck in a haunted movie theater, and I've seen Blonde, the new pseudo-biographical drama from Andrew Dominik that takes a look at the life of movie star Norma Jean Baker, better known as Marilyn Monroe. More specifically, it shows the many troubles and tragedies she had to endure, from an early orphaning to failing marriages to ongoing assumptions about her worth as a person, as well as the brief moments of her life where she felt true joy and happiness, and especially love. Most of all, the movie seeks to explore a conflict she faced on a daily basis, that being the reconciliation between her true self as Norma Jean and the image of Marilyn, and whether or not the latter had become more of a reality than the former. It's a bit more complicated than I can describe, of course, as it also explores several other aspects of celebrity culture and psychological trauma, as well as how Norma Jean was able or unable to cope with these and other hardships throughout her life. Her primary mechanism is in her attempt to portray Marilyn as a character of her own creation and design, but it's a task that is weighed down heavily by those around her, who only know her as Marilyn and don't want to bother with anything that might give her any personal agency. The main story is in this central through line that makes its way into the many events of her life, as is a subplot surrounding her supposedly lost father and her hope for his return. But the movie also tries to make a point about the greater culture of Hollywood and fame, themes of objectification and sexism, and other ideas. While it's effective enough in getting across what they want to say, they do end up taking away from the main focus on Norma Jean's personal struggles, which does have its time, of course, but feels pushed away in favor of more sensationalized aspects. Though the film does try to take this even further by commenting on the notion of the audience as a voyeur of sorts. Unfortunately, it doesn't involve this as much as it seems to want, even though it's a theme that definitely would have boosted the main storylines and how they touch upon the blurring of Norma Jean and Marilyn. That really does feel like it's meant to be the idea given the most attention, seeing how integral it is not only to her but to modern concepts of celebrity and acting. But it's just treated as another tragic element than a true layer to the story. While the story does suffer a bit from this misdirection, the production as a whole does have much more going for it, with lead actress Ana de Armas almost completely justifying the movie's existence in her portrayal of Norma Jean. She's completely lost in the role, with a great ability to navigate between her and Marilyn, not only when she's just playing a character, but also as Marilyn becomes the reality. The blurring between the two women, as well as Norma Jean's mental and physical state as a whole, is put on display almost entirely through cinematography and editing, which makes great use of every possible element, from shifting aspect ratios and switching from color to black and white photography and back, to the manipulation of time and space to simulate a haze of confusion and dissociation. Again, it even pulls the viewer into the film with point-of-view shots as characters look or speak directly into the camera. I will remark that it does get a bit ambiguous as to what exactly the different cinematic techniques outright represent, but at the very least, they do have their practical purposes as well. The score of the film is also very distinct, with an interesting use of non-traditional instrumentation that's often at odds with the licensed tracks being used, which are sung by Marilyn and almost always inserted ironically against the tragedies of her life. At this point, this sort of juxtaposition is all too common in dramas, to the point of being cliche. But it works here well enough thanks to the overall themes of clashing identities and putting on an image. Unfortunately, those themes are still overshadowed by the amount of other sensationalistic ideas and events of the story, which really do take away from the more interesting elements. It's not something that completely ruins the experience, nor does the film seem to intend to brush aside its character exploration for these scenes. But there is definitely an imbalance between what the story seems to want and what we actually get. If that's meant to be one last layer to the film as a metatextual representation of the central conflict, then it doesn't quite have the effect that I think was intended. Blonde, Andrew Dominik, 2022. 3.5 stars. While I would go ahead and recommend seeing it, I definitely would say that it's not a movie for everybody, even if you are interested in Norma Jean's life or classic Hollywood. That's it for this review. If you liked it, leave a like. If you have something to add, leave a comment. Subscribe to the channel for more reviews. As for why I called this a pseudo-biographical film, it's because I stayed through the end of the credits and saw the usual disclaimer that this movie was fictitious and everything was coincidence, unless that's something that appears at the end of every movie, no matter how much of it is factual. This one is based on a novel, though.